Welcome to the third lecture on The Awakening. In our lectures up to this point, we've explored how Edna Pontillier was beginning to have a sense of herself as existing in a system that privileged some and deprivileged others. For years, Edna has believed that she's followed the traditional advice of her family to marry for financial security and support. Only now, over summer, has she discovered that her interior life is mostly empty. The novel has suggested that her plot of personal development rests largely on whether she will be able to navigate the dangers of society to the point where she can use this information, that social systems are constructed by people not arranged by nature, to benefit herself. The novel tells us that few people realize such systems are constructed, but even fewer are able to use that insight to improve their lives or their situation. For most of the summer, Edna has spent time with Robert Lebrun, a young single man. Robert has been allowed to engage in distant courtly relationships with older women, but he understands if these relationships were to include sexual encounters, he would be removed from Creole society and essentially be cast off from his family and friends, just like Alcée Arobin. As the summer progresses, Robert begins to doubt his ability to manage his impulses. He spends days away from Edna, only upon his return to spend every waking hour with her. His irregularity confuses Edna, as, at least at this point, she doesn't understand why Robert's actions are so erratic. In this lecture, we'll look at a number of passages so that together we can stitch together the plot. I'm in chapter 15, the point where Robert announces his plans to move to Mexico. Earlier in the book, Robert has received a letter from friends who have recently moved to Mexico to make their fortune. As you listen to the passage this time, see if you can identify Robert's actual motivation for going so abruptly to Mexico, and then see if you can pinpoint how much Edna understands of Robert's motivation. Remember, as we talked about previously, this novel, like an art house movie, asks us as readers to observe the characters' actions, gestures, and dialogue, and then to intuit their underlying motivation on our own.
Well, in case it shouldn't be forever, how long will it be? I don't know. This seems to me perfectly preposterous and uncalled for. I don't like it. I don't understand your motive for silence and mystery, never saying a word to me about it this morning. He remained silent, not offering to defend himself. He said only, after a moment, "Don't part from me in any ill humour. I never knew you to be out of patience with me before." "I don't want to part in any ill humour," she said. "But can't you understand? I've grown used to seeing you, to having you with me all the time, and your action seems unfriendly, even unkind. You don't even offer an excuse for it. Why, I was planning to be together, thinking of how pleasant it would be to see you in the city next winter." "So was I," he blurted. "Perhaps that's the—" He stood up suddenly and held out his hand. "Good-bye, my dear Mrs. Pontellier. Good-bye. You won't—I hope you won't completely forget me." She clung to his hand, striving to detain him. "Write to me when you get there, won't you, Robert?" she entreated. "I will, thank you. Good-bye." How unlike Robert! The merest acquaintance would have said something more emphatic than "I will, thank you, good-bye" to such a request. He had evidently already taken leave of the people over at the house, for he descended the steps and went to join Beaudelet, who was out there with an oar across his shoulder waiting for Robert. They walked away in the darkness. She could only hear Beaudelet's voice. Robert had apparently not even spoken a word of greeting to his companion. Edna bit her handkerchief convulsively, striving to hold back and to hide, even from herself as she would have hidden from another, the emotion which was troubling, tearing her. Her eyes were brimming with tears. For the first time she recognized the symptoms of infatuation, which she had felt incipiently as a child, as a girl in her earliest teens, and later as a young woman. The recognition did not lessen the reality, the poignancy of the revelation by any suggestion or promise of instability. The past was nothing to her, offered no lesson which she was willing to heed. The future was a mystery which she never attempted to penetrate. The present alone was significant, was hers, to torture her as it was doing then with the biting conviction that she had lost that which she had held, that she had been denied that which her impassioned, newly awakened being demanded.
So hopefully you were able to see that Robert's motivation in leaving was tied to his attraction to Edna and his inability to fully control his impulses. He has very little interest in business pursuits in Mexico, as we'll find out later. But he's leaving because he no longer trusts himself with Edna. And how much of this does Edna understand of Robert's motivation? Very little, if any at all. And in terms of the book's larger plot of personal development, this is a huge problem. The novel suggests that Edna will need to nimbly navigate society if she hopes to use the information of the awakening to improve her life. Here, with her inability to read Robert's true motives, the novel suggests that perhaps Edna might not have the deep sense of social insight she'll need to successfully complete her personal journey. The next passage we'll look at is in Chapter 17. Earlier in the novel, the prose tied Edna to the image of a bird, particularly the parrot on the Lebrun's porch, who is kept for his beautiful appearance. Here we'll see Edna again, tied to the image of a bird, as a person in a cage, a beautiful cage with beautiful furnishings, who is growing uncomfortable at her confinement. Leonce, after dinner, has already left the house to go out and spend time with friends, leaving Edna at home with at least one of the servants.
After finishing her dinner she went to her room, having instructed the boy to tell any other callers that she was indisposed. It was a large, beautiful room, rich and picturesque in the soft, dim light which the maid had turned low. She went and stood at an open window, and looked out upon the deep tangle of the garden below. All the mystery and witchery of the night seemed to have gathered there amid the perfumes and the dusky and tortuous outlines of flowers and foliage. She was seeking herself, and finding herself, in just such sweet half-darkness which met her moods. But the voices were not soothing that came to her from the darkness, and the sky above, and the stars. They jeered, and sounded mournful notes without promise, devoid even of hope. She turned back into the room and began to walk to and fro down its whole length, without stopping, without resting. She carried in her hands a thin handkerchief, which she tore into ribbons, rolled into a ball, and flung from her.
Let's pause here for a moment. In this passage, the novel presents Edna again as the elegant parrot looking down out of her beautiful cage. If you've ever spent time around parrots, you know that they hang out at the upper portions of their cage and look out at the world, and that's exactly what Edna's doing here. Also like a parrot, Edna is perch-pacing back and forth. If you give a parrot a Kleenex or a handkerchief, what will they do with it? Tear it up, which is exactly what Edna does here. And after this, the novel moves towards symbolism, as, following in the same passage, Edna tries to break the symbol of marriage, the wedding band.
Once she stopped, and taking off her wedding ring, flung it upon the carpet. When she saw it lying there, she stamped her heel upon it, striving to crush it. But her small boot heel did not make an indenture, not a mark upon the little glittering circlet. In a sweeping passion she seized a glass vase from the table and flung it upon the tiles of the hearth. She wanted to destroy something. The crash and clatter were what she wanted to hear. A maid, alarmed at the din of breaking glass, entered the room to discover what was the matter. "A vase fell upon the hearth," said Edna. "Never mind, leave it till morning." "Oh, you might get some of the glass in your feet, ma'am," insisted the young woman, picking up bits of the broken vase that were scattered upon the carpet. "And here's your ring, ma'am, under the chair." Edna held out her hand, and taking the ring, slipped it upon her finger.
But women in 1899 under Louisiana law have no ability to break the contract of marriage, in the same way here that Edna is unable to damage the wedding ring. So why does she want to break the vase? Leonce enjoys collecting beautiful things. Edna feels as though she is one of Leonce's possessions. When she becomes sunburnt, Leonce is mostly concerned because she's damaged her beauty. Here with the vase, Edna appears to be saying, "Okay, Leonce, you like to collect beautiful things? Here's what I think of that. I can break your beautiful things. And I'd like the shards of the vase left there as a message." But ultimately, a servant cleans it up, removing both the danger and the message before Leonce returns home. In earlier lectures, we've defined Madame Ratignolle and Mademoiselle Reisz as literary foils for Edna, women whose lives work as an example as to how Edna might arrange a future version of herself. But only Madame Ratignolle is deeply concerned with Edna's well-being. Mademoiselle Reisz often sees Edna as a curiosity, as one of those society women who works very little yet has a life of luxury and ease. Mademoiselle Reisz resents them, as despite her own talent and labor, she can barely afford a 2-room apartment. She is so poor, she is often described as wearing the same shabby artificial violets in her hair. Edna's family in this part of Louisiana would have a type of minor celebrity standing due to Leonce's wealth. Notices of their activities would appear in the society section of the newspaper. In the following passage, Mademoiselle Reisz, who is not a particularly warm person, is trying to use the gestures of warmth to provoke Edna into revealing the secrets that lie inside her house, mostly to amuse herself.
When Edna knocked at Mademoiselle Reisz's front-room door, and entered, she discovered that person standing beside the window, engaged in mending or patching an old prunella gaiter. The little musician laughed all over when she saw Edna. Her laugh consisted of a contortion of the face and all the muscles of the body. She seemed strikingly homely, standing there in the afternoon light. She still wore the shabby lace and the artificial bunch of violets on the side of her head. "So you remembered me at last," said Mademoiselle. "I had said to myself, 'Ah, bah, she will never come.'" "Did you want me to come?" asked Edna with a smile. "I had not thought much about it," answered Mademoiselle. The two had seated themselves on a little bumpy sofa which stood against the wall. "I am glad, however, that you came. I have the water boiling back there and was just about to make some coffee. You will drink a cup with me. And how is la belle dame? Always handsome, always healthy, always contented?" She took Edna's hand in her strong, wiry fingers, holding it loosely, without warmth, and executing a sort of double theme upon the back and palm.
Here, Mademoiselle Reisz is trying to lure Edna into her confidence. So how does this work? Mademoiselle Reisz is fishing. This is the first time she sends out the bait. In this, Mademoiselle Reisz says, "And how is la belle dame? Always handsome, always healthy, always contented?" Mademoiselle Reisz knows that none of this is true. She expects Edna to object, to say, "Oh no, you don't understand, it's all an illusion. I'm really terribly unhappy." But Edna's not taking the bait. So Mademoiselle Reisz is going to have to rebait her hook and send it out again, the next time as a statement perhaps designed to provoke offense.
"Yes," she went on, "I sometimes thought, she will never come. She promised, as those women in society always do, without meaning it. She will not come. For I really don't believe you like me, Mrs. Pontellier."
"For I really don't believe you like me, Mrs. Pontellier." And what is the expected response? Well, Edna's supposed to say, "Oh yes, of course I like you." A statement that later Mademoiselle Reisz can construct into a bridge over which the two of them can walk into the private portions of Edna's life. Mademoiselle Reisz might then be able to say, "Well, since you like me and I like you, you can tell me the secrets of your house." But this attempt to enter the emotional space of Edna's life doesn't go exactly as planned.
"For I really don't believe you like me, Mrs. Pontellier." "I don't know whether I like you or not," replied Edna, gazing down at the little woman with a quizzical look. The candour of Mrs. Pontellier's admission greatly pleased Mademoiselle Reisz. She expressed her gratification by repairing forthwith to the region of the gasoline stove and rewarding her guest with the promised cup of coffee.
So Mademoiselle Reisz's plan is not working as intended, at least not yet. But is she upset? Not at all. For her, it's starting to get interesting. The game is now on. She's looking for the lever that, if pulled, will open the inner areas of Edna's life to her. She doesn't know what it is yet, but she's confident she'll find it.
The coffee and the biscuit accompanying it proved very acceptable to Edna, who had declined refreshment at Madame Lebrun's, and was now beginning to feel hungry. Mademoiselle set the tray which she brought in upon a small table near at hand, and seated herself once again on the lumpy sofa. "I have had a letter from your friend," she remarked, as she poured a little cream into Edna's cup and handed it to her. "My friend?" "Yes, your friend Robert. He wrote to me from the City of Mexico." "Wrote to you?" repeated Edna in amazement, stirring her coffee absently. "Yes, to me. Why not? Don't stir all the warmth out of your coffee. Drink it. Though the letter might as well have been sent to you. It was nothing but Mrs. Pontellier from beginning to end." "Let me see it," requested the young woman entreatingly. "No. A letter concerns no one but the person who writes it and the one to whom it is written." "Haven't you just said it concerned me from beginning to end?" "It was written about you, not to you. Have you seen Mrs. Pontellier? How is she looking? He asks. As Mrs. Pontellier says, or as Mrs. Pontellier once said, if Mrs. Pontellier should call upon you, play for her that impromptu of Chopin's, my favourite. I heard it here a day or two ago, but not as you play it. I should like to know how it affects her. And so on, as if he supposed we were constantly in each other's society." "Let me see the letter." "Oh, no." "Have you answered it?" "No." "Let me see the letter." "No, and again no."
And with that, Mademoiselle Reisz has discovered that information about Robert, or rather, withholding information about Robert, is the key that will allow her to understand Edna's interior life. The next time that Edna meets Mademoiselle Reisz, in Chapter 26, the Mademoiselle is equally manipulative, trying to place Edna in a position where she is again needled into offering up revelations. Why does Mademoiselle Reisz want these revelations? Well, as you know, interior of characters is a matter of speculation in The Awakening, but I believe that Mademoiselle Reisz is a bitter character who finds comfort in knowing other people are unhappy in ways similar to herself.
"I will take some brandy," said Edna, shivering as she removed her gloves and overshoes. She drank the liquor from the glass as a man would have done. Then, flinging herself upon the uncomfortable sofa, she said, "Mademoiselle, I am going to move away from my house on Esplanade Street." "Ah!" ejaculated the musician, neither surprised nor especially interested. Nothing ever seemed to astonish her very much. She was endeavouring to adjust the bunch of violets which had become loose from its fastening in her hair. Edna drew her down upon the sofa, and taking a pin from her own hair, secured the shabby artificial flowers in their accustomed place. "Aren't you astonished?" "Passably. Where are you going? To New York? To Iberville? To your father's in Mississippi? Where?"
This is arranged as an insult, likely to provoke Edna into a deeper level of confession. How is it an insult? Well, you need to know who is presently in each location. Where are you going? To New York? And who is in New York? Why, Léonce is there right now. To Iberville? And who's in Iberville? Well, Léonce's family is in Iberville, specifically Edna's father-in-law. To your father in Mississippi? Where? Well, Mademoiselle Reisz is suggesting that Edna couldn't possibly live alone, or more specifically, she couldn't live without the protection and support of an older man. She's saying, are you going to run off to hubby or to daddy, or where is it that you're going to go? Edna, however, doesn't seem to recognize that this is designed to offend her and then to push her more deeply into confession.
"Just 2 steps away," laughed Edna, "in a little 4-room house round the corner. It looks so cosy, so inviting and restful whenever I pass by, and it's for rent. I'm tired looking after that big house. It never seemed like mine, anyway, like home. It's too much trouble. I have to keep too many servants. I'm tired bothering with them." "That is not your true reason, ma belle. There is no use in telling me lies. I don't know your reason, but you have not told me the truth." Edna did not protest or endeavour to justify herself. "The house, The money that provides for it are not mine. Isn't that enough reason?" "They are your husband's," returned mademoiselle, with a shrug and a malicious elevation of the eyebrows.
Let me just pause at this point for a moment, because there's something interesting happening here. This is a book that never interprets character motivation, or I should say rarely interprets character motivation, but here we can see that there is a malicious rise of the eyebrow, indicating that whatever Mademoiselle Reisz is up to is somehow tinged with malice.
Oh, I see there is no deceiving you. Then let me tell you. It is a caprice. I have a little money of my own from my mother's estate, which my father sends me by driblets. I won a large sum this winter on the races, and I am beginning to sell my sketches. Laidpore is more and more pleased with my work. He says it grows in force and individuality. I cannot judge of that myself, but I feel that I have gained in ease and confidence. However, as I said, I have sold a good many through Laidpore. I can live in the tiny house for little or nothing, with one servant. Old Celestine, who works occasionally for me, says that she will come and stay with me and do my work. I know I shall like it, like the feeling of freedom and independence." "What does your husband say?" "I have not told him yet. I only thought of it this morning. He will think I am demented, no doubt. Perhaps you think so." Mademoiselle shook her head slowly. "Your reason is not yet clear to me," she said. Neither was it quite clear to Edna herself, but it unfolded itself as she sat for a while in silence.
While away, Léonce learns of Edna's plans to move out of the house. His response is to hire, quote, a well-known architect concerning the remodeling of his home, changes which he had long contemplated and which he desired carried forward during his temporary absence. That is, Léonce is concerned how others in the business community will view Edna's move. This specific story is designed to manage two possible rumors. First of all, Léonce is worried that members of the business community might suspect there are problems in his marriage. This cover story offers an explanation that, oh no, there are no problems, we're simply remodeling. And second, he's concerned that members of the community might suspect that he's fallen on hard times due to poor business choices, as his wife is now living in a much smaller house. Again, this cover story provides an explanation of, oh no, not only have we not fallen on hard times, business is so good, we're going to remodel our house so completely that Edna will need to move out temporarily while the work is done. We never learn what work Léonce proposes to be done, but you can bet that he's arranged for an architect and workmen to arrive at the house very shortly after he learns of Edna's departure. Léonce is gifted in protecting the identity of his family and of his business, and knows how to manage how others see him. Will everyone believe the cover story? Maybe or maybe not. But they'll believe it to the point that no one will challenge him publicly. At this point, we're in the final third of the novella. Edna has left Léonce, and Robert has left Louisiana. During the book's first 24 chapters, Edna becomes increasingly aware of possibilities beyond her marriage to Léonce, yet also aware of her social limitations. Up to this point in her life, she has primarily served men. Her father, then her husband, then her sons. While her husband and her sons are away, Edna is able to direct her own interests, the arts, the horse races, and then her relationship with Alcée Arobin. The author, Kate Chopin, understands that she has a charged issue with Edna's extramarital affair. Edna never has a sexual experience with Robert. Remember, this is specifically why he left for Mexico. But she does with Alcée Arobin. There are 2 sections in the novel where this clearly occurs, only it might be easy to miss those passages. Chopin is not the first American author to include an extramarital affair in a novel. But traditionally, characters who participate in these affairs are either punished by the book's drama or reach a moment of deep regret. In her book, the affair is presented as part of Edna's education, an experience that has the possibility to assist Edna in better knowing herself and understanding her freedom. Chopin would have had good reasons to believe that some members of the public might react violently towards such a depiction of an affair in a novel. There was one famous case of a public killing of an actress who played the role of a woman engaged in an affair on stage. It is for this reason, I imagine, that Chopin limited the details that surround the two sexual encounters with Arobin. But I want to point both out so you can see where they are and understand their purpose in the plot of self-development. The first is in chapter 27. This passage, I think, would be particularly easy to miss, as the scene is rendered in metaphoric language and suggestions. Here's the passage. It was the first kiss of her life, to which her nature had really responded. It was a flaming torch that kindled desire. Edna cried a little that night after Arobin left her. It was only one phase of the multitudinous emotions which assailed her. There was with her an overwhelming feeling of irresponsibility. There was the shock of the unexpected and the unaccustomed. There was her husband's reproach looking at her from the external things around her which he had provided for her external existence. Let me pause there for a moment. How much guilt does Edna feel for spending time with Robert? None. But whatever has happened here with Alcée is clearly at a deeper, intimate level than anything that happened with Robert, because the corresponding guilt is also deeper. There was Robert's reproach, making itself felt by a quicker, fiercer, more overpowering love, which had awakened within her toward him. Above all, there was understanding. And here's where we get to some of the metaphoric language. And so this is the idea that sexual experiences bring knowledge, bring insight. Above all, there was understanding. She felt as if a mist had been lifted from her eyes, enabling her to look upon and comprehend the significance of life, that monster made up of beauty and brutality. And this almost surely is cribbed from Shakespeare, the idea of the sexual act being both beautiful and brutal. But among the conflicting sensations which assailed her, there was neither shame nor remorse. There was a dull pang of regret, because it was not the kiss of love which had inflamed her, because it was not love which held this cup of life to her lips. There's a little play on words there. This experience is holding a cup of life, something that's going to give her life, but also I think it's playing on the idea that sex produces new life as well. And so the sexual experience in this passage is arranged with metaphor and suggestion. The other passage is in chapter 31, and this is more direct, but still reserved, especially by contemporary standards. But here I think it's easier to see through the language to what is actually happening. This occurs after Edna's dinner, once everyone else except Alcée has left. He stood up beside her and smoothed her hair with his soft, magnetic hand. His touch conveyed to her a certain physical comfort. She could have fallen quietly asleep there if he had continued to pass his hand over her hair. He brushed the hair upward from the nape of her neck. "I hope you'll feel better and happier in the morning," he said. "You've tried to do too much in the past few days. The dinner was the last straw. You might have dispensed with it." "Yes," she admitted, "it was stupid." "No, it was delightful, but it's worn you out." His hand strayed to touch her beautiful shoulders, and he could feel the response of her flesh to his touch. He seated himself beside her and kissed her lightly upon the shoulder. "I thought you were going away," she said in an uneven tone. "I am, after I've said good night." "Good night," she murmured. He did not answer, except to continue to caress her. He did not say good night until she had become supple to his gentle, seductive entreaties. The novella begins its move towards closure in chapter 33 with Robert's return. Why doesn't Robert come, as Edna expects, to find her immediately upon his return? Well, simple. he's still attracted to her and doesn't want to rekindle desires with a married woman that might prove more than he can manage. There are a number of questions here on how we should view Robert. Is he courageous in his determination to uphold his family's values and not jeopardize his closeness with them? Or is he a coward because he conforms to Creole social conventions despite his emotions? I believe a good case could be made for both sides. Robert likely wouldn't have seen Edna for months after his return, except someone orchestrates a meeting. Where do they meet? Why, they meet at Mademoiselle Reisz's apartment. Clearly, Mademoiselle Reisz has told Edna, "Meet me at my apartment, say at 2," or something very close to that. And then separately, she tells Robert the exact same thing. Then they both show up expecting to see Mademoiselle Reisz, but she's not there. Neither ever put this together that they've been set up, and why isn't Mademoiselle there? In this situation, she could only act as a chaperone, a person whose presence would dampen any passion that might otherwise be expressed. She simply wants to cause complex trouble, to mix this space with that acid and see what happens. And if anything interesting does happen, she'll hear about it later. As you listen to the passage this time, notice how all the clues are there, the evidence that this meeting, likely against the wishes of Robert, has been arranged by Mademoiselle Reisz.
Edna sat at the window, which looked out over the housetops and across the river. The window frame was filled with pots of flowers, and she sat and picked the dry leaves from a rose geranium. The day was warm, and the breeze which blew from the river was very pleasant. She removed her hat and laid it on the piano. She went on picking the leaves and digging around the plants with her hat pins. Once she thought she heard Mademoiselle Reisz approaching, but it was a young black girl, who came in bringing a small bundle of laundry, which she deposited in the adjoining room, and went away. Edna seated herself at the piano, and softly picked out with one hand the bars of a piece of music which lay open before her. A half-hour went by. There was the occasional sound of people going and coming in the lower hall. She was growing interested in her occupation of picking out the aria, when there was a second rap at the door. She vaguely wondered what these people did when they found Mademoiselle's door locked. "Come in," she called, turning her face toward the door. And this time it was Robert Lebrun who presented himself. She attempted to rise. She could not have done so without betraying the agitation which mastered her at the sight of him, so she fell back upon the stool, only exclaiming, "Why, Robert!" He came and clasped her hand, seemingly without knowing what he was saying or doing. "Mrs. Pontellier, how do you happen... Oh, how well you look! Is Mademoiselle Reisz not here? I never expected to see you." "When did you come back?" asked Edna in an unsteady voice, wiping her face with her handkerchief. She seemed ill at ease on the piano-stool, and he begged her to take the chair by the window. She did so mechanically while he seated himself on the stool. "I returned day before yesterday," he answered, while he leaned his arm on the keys, bringing forth a crash of discordant sound. "Day before yesterday," she repeated aloud, and went on thinking to herself, "Day before yesterday," in a sort of uncomprehending way.
For a while, this novella holds out the possibility of a happy ending for Edna, that she and Robert might somehow abandon convention to find happiness in a mutually defined relationship with each other. In chapter 36, Robert confesses that his desire for Edna was the reason that he left for Mexico. But immediately after that confession, the possibility of a happy ending falls away, as Edna understands one of Robert's central limitations. As we move through the passage this time, see if you can pinpoint the exact limitation that now prevents Edna from moving forward in this relationship.
She leaned over and kissed him, a soft, cool, delicate kiss, whose voluptuous sting penetrated his whole being. Then she moved away from him. He followed and took her in his arms, just holding her close to him. She put her hand up to his face and pressed his cheek against her own. The action was full of love and tenderness. He sought her lips again. Then he drew her down upon the sofa beside him and held her hand in both of his. "Now you know," he said. "Now you know what I have been fighting against since last summer at Grand Isle, what drove me away and drove me back again." "Why have you been fighting against it?" she asked. Her face glowed with soft lights. "Why?" Because you were not free. You were Léonce Pontellier's wife. I couldn't help loving you if you were 10 times his wife, but so long as I went away from you and kept away, I could help telling you so." She put her free hand up to his shoulder, and then against his cheek, rubbing it softly. He kissed her again. His face was warm and flushed. "Then in Mexico—" "There in Mexico I was thinking of you all the time, and longing for you." "But not writing to me," she interrupted. "Something put into my head that you cared for me, and I lost my senses. I forgot everything but a wild dream of your some way becoming my wife." "Your wife?" "Religion, loyalty, everything would give way if only you cared." "Then you must have forgotten that I was Léonce Pontellier's wife." "Oh, I was demented, dreaming of wild, impossible things, recalling men who had set their wives free. We have heard of such things." "Yes, we have heard of such things." "I came back full of vague, mad intentions, and when I got here—" "When you got here you never came near me." She was still caressing his cheek. "I realized what a cur I was to dream of such a thing, even if you had been willing." She took his face between her hands and looked into it as if she would never withdraw her eyes more. She kissed him on the forehead, the eyes, the cheeks, and the lips. "You have been a very, very foolish boy, wasting your time dreaming of impossible things when you speak of Mr. Pontellier setting me free. I am no longer one of Mr. Pontellier's possessions to dispose of or not. I give myself where I choose. If he were to say, 'Here, Robert, take her and be happy, she is yours,' I should laugh at you both."
At this point, any illusions that Edna had about a relationship with Robert are washed away. Robert is a kinder, more compassionate, more social version of Léonce. Edna enjoys herself in his company, but Robert is utterly unable to lift himself up through an act of his own observation and acknowledge that the social system around him is constructed and can be therefore discarded. What Edna sees here, with this talk of Léonce possibly setting her free, is that Robert accepts the common cultural view in Louisiana of his time that wives were a type of possession that husbands owned. Is there a path forward for Edna to be with Robert? No. She will never again let someone else believe that he owns her. At this point in the novella, Edna looks at her realistic possibilities moving forward. How happy would she be if she lived again with Léonce? Not happy at all, particularly as she now understands the underlying cause of her unhappiness with him. How happy would she be if she were to take on a social role like that of Alcée Arobin? At one point she acknowledges that she would find an emptiness there, spending her life with one person, then another, then another. She also seems to believe that this option, in terms of public approbation, might harm her boys. How happy would she be if she lived by herself and focused on art? Well, she's seen the example of Mademoiselle Reisz, a woman who is bitter and lonely and poor. How happy would she be with Robert? He's the one person she still thinks of affectionately, but she sees now also how this is a trap. At this point in the story, she appears to understand how biology is used against women in this culture. Women feel desire, which leads them into marriage, where they are entrapped in a legal situation whereby they have no rights. This is what happened to her with Léonce, and she refuses to repeat this mistake with Robert. Sometime after visiting her children in Iberville, she arrives at the decision that she will take control of her life by ending it, by refusing to participate in a system that demeans her. By the time she reaches the beach, she has arrived at this conclusion. The Gulf is a place of strength for her, a place where she taught herself to do something few women in 1899 could do, to swim. It's also a place of sensuality. In this, the beach holds these two experiences that are important to her. And this is where she chooses to bring her life to an end.
The water of the Gulf stretched out before her, gleaming with the million lights of the sun. The voice of the sea is seductive, never ceasing, whispering, clamoring, murmuring, inviting the soul to wander in abysses of solitude. All along the white beach, Up and down, there was no living thing in sight. A bird with a broken wing was beating the air above, reeling, fluttering, circling disabled down, down to the water.
And here we arrive at the last time in the novella where the narration links Edna to an image of a bird. From the parrot on the porch, to Edna's entrapment in her beautiful house, to her move to the pigeon or pigeon house, to this bird over the gulf with its broken wing. Just like Edna, this bird seeks flight and freedom, but is unable to find it.
Edna had found her old bathing suit still hanging, faded, upon its accustomed peg. She put it on, leaving her clothing in the bath-house. But when she was there beside the sea, absolutely alone, she cast the unpleasant, pricking garments from her, and for the first time in her life she stood naked in the open air, at the mercy of the sun, the breeze that beat upon her, and the waves that invited her.
Before she arrives at the water, Edna almost surely knows that she wants to venture into the Gulf with just her body, without any elements of the cultural life around her, such as her clothes. So why does she go through all the trouble of changing into her bathing clothes when she could just leave her street clothes right there at the edge of the Gulf? Her clothes, left in the bathhouse, will prove that she went swimming in the Gulf. I believe she's trying to construct a story that will be told after she's gone with the things that she leaves behind. And who is good in this novella at creating stories that the community will believe? Well, Léonce is good at that. Edna knows that Léonce will create a story that explains that her death was a terrible accident. Who knows why she wanted to swim on a day like that, he'll say, but she'd only taught herself to swim the previous summer. What a terrible tragedy this is. He will create the story to protect his business and his social standing. But is Edna worried about those things? Not at all. I believe she would like to protect her two boys. It is one thing to lose a parent to a terrible accident, but quite another to lose a parent to suicide. She doesn't want her boys to work through the darker questions that would accompany a suicide, such as them asking, "Didn't she want to see us grow up? Didn't she love us?" With the clothes left in the bathhouse, she knows she can count on Léonce to create a cover story that will recast her decision as an accident.
How strange and awful it seemed to stand naked under the sky! How delicious! She felt like some new-born creature, opening its eyes in a familiar world that it had never known. The foamy wavelets curled up to her white feet, and coiled like serpents about her ankles. She walked out. The water was chill, but she walked on. The water was deep, but she lifted her white body and reached out with a long, sweeping stroke. The touch of the sea is sensuous, enfolding the body in its soft, close embrace. She went on and on. She remembered the night she swam far out, and recalled the terror that seized her at the fear of being unable to regain the shore. She did not look back now, but went on and on, thinking of the blue-grass meadow that she had traversed when a little child, believing that it had no beginning and no end. Her arms and legs were growing tired.
In these last moments, she thinks mostly of men and how her relationships with them have cast her in different roles, all with prescribed behaviors and duties. She thinks of Léonce, which cast her in the role of wife, then her boys, which cast her in the role of mother.
She thought of Léonce and the children. They were a part of her life, but they need not have thought that they could possess her, body and soul. How Mademoiselle Reisz would have laughed, perhaps sneered, if she knew. "And you call yourself an artist? What pretensions, madame! The artist must possess the courageous soul that dares and defies." Exhaustion was pressing upon and overpowering her. "Good-bye, because I love you."
Whose voice is this? Well, this is the voice of Robert, another significant man in her life.
He did not know. He did not understand. He would never understand. Perhaps Dr. Mandelet would have understood if she had seen him, but it was too late. The shore was far behind her, and her strength was gone. She looked into the distance. and the old terror flamed up for an instant, then sank again. Edna heard her father's voice, and her sister Margaret's. She heard the barking of an old dog that was chained to the sycamore tree. The spurs of the cavalry officer clanged as he walked across the porch.
And here we get the two final men, the two final roles. The mention of her father cast her in the role of daughter, but also there's this cavalry officer. Who's that? Well, this is the first person for whom she felt romantic desire. And in this, the novel is suggesting that this culture has arranged the process of romantic desire into a weapon that is used against women who allow themselves to enjoy the natural process of attraction. Attraction in this novel is the first step that leads to a loss of legal rights and independence, which, at least for Edna, has brought her back to the Gulf.
There was the hum of bees, and the musky odor of pinks filled the air.
The novella has already told us that Edna lacks the strength to regain the shore, but the story leaves us here before her passing, as though Edna might possibly exist forever in this moment, swimming in the Gulf, surrounded by the second-hand sensuality of the warm water. In this we can see two major components of late American realism. Not only is this novella relying on us as readers to construct the story by watching the characters without the benefit of explanatory narration, the novella is also exploring a contemporary social problem, the imbalance of power in marriage between men and women. And it's presenting a social argument that laws in which women lose legal rights through marriage will produce situations like this, where people like Edna, despite their talents and insights, are unable to find a reasonable path to move forward in a productive manner. And that brings our discussion of The Awakening to a close.